welcome to my channel. Today I'm here with another analog photography video and I will be talking about the differences between 35mm and medium format films. And before we begin, just a little reminder, if you haven't done so, please make sure that you subscribe to my channel and hit the bell button so that you don't miss any of my videos. I upload weekly, so you'll be getting new content every Tuesday. Okay, let's begin. So, as I mentioned, today I will be talking about medium format and 35mm films. So I guess you can sum it up as films that need development, because there's also instant films that are quite popular and they have different kinds as well, but I won't be focusing on them right now. And I know I did another video about different film formats before, but I want to dig a little deeper into these two because they're the most common and I got a lot of questions about these two. And some common things about both are, as I said, they both need film development in order to see your photos. So once you put it in your camera, shoot the entire thing, rewind or not rewind depending on your choice, take it to a photo lab, and after it's been developed you get to see your photos. So it's a longer process, and they have both been initially produced by Kodak, and this one was first produced in 1901 and this 1934. And the reason for these was because the previous formats were more glass based and they were more fragile, expensive, heavier, with a harder process in order to get the image. So what Kodak wanted was to produce something that was cheaper, more easily accessible, so that more people could become amateur or professional photographers. And they first started with this, and initially it was really popular, but then lost the battle sort of to the 35mm, which is a little bit easier to use. And those are the common things, and now let's dig deeper into both. As medium format is the older version, I will be starting with that. And as I've been saying, it's called medium format or 120 film or 120 film, never 120mm or 120mm, because it is not 120 millimeters. It is only about 61 millimeters. So if you hear 120mm, that is sort of like a wrong expression. Anyways, medium format or 120 film. This film, this specific film, has been opened and burned, so it's safe for me to open this, but unless you know that you're not ever gonna use the film and it's okay to burn it, or if it has already been developed, never do this because this film is unusable right now. But anyways, so this film has a paper backing and it is very common in this format. And the paper backing goes, and then you get to see different markings. So what these markings are these arrows actually, if I can hold it like this, these arrows actually show you where the film begins. So when you're winding the film in your camera, you need to be careful of not winding it too much forward. And then you get to see different numbers. And what these numbers mean are how many photos you will get with that specific roll. The film goes all the way up to 8, 12, or 16. And how you load the camera and how many photos your camera is able to capture actually affects how many photos you'll get and which line from here that you will be following in your camera. And once the film is finished, you can see it here, there's still some black paper. And then when your film is done, you actually don't rewind it, but you take it out in a spool like this, and it's safe to take for development. And wow, that probably didn't make any sense, but I'll explain further. So what happens is, inside your camera, when you put your film in, you, after every photo, wind your film forward. And I'll try to be as quick as I can about this. And after your film is done, in the medium format cameras, there is no rewinding mechanism. So what you do is, if you try to rewind it, there's actually no tape here. So this actually gets stuck inside your camera and you can't really rewind it. And so what you need to do is keep going forward inside the camera. And once you feel sort of the tension leaving or see the emptiness in the frame that I will show shortly, you can take it off and stick it and take it to a photo lab. And as long as no paper or film is showing from around the spool, it is safe. But if you leave it, wow, this is tight. Anyways, there are some cases where it can get loose if you don't tape it, and that actually might burn your film or let light leaks in. So you have to be careful about taping it once you take it off your camera. And this format will generally produce square images, and depending on how many photos you will be getting or which camera you're using, it might change, but the most common are 12 squares or 16 squares. And there are some cameras that do different things, so I'll talk about those as well. So the first camera that introduced me to medium format photography was the Lomography Diana F+. It was the classic version, so it was the Diana blue with the black here. And this is a newer model that was produced a few years back for winter. But technically they're the same. And this camera was originally produced in Hong Kong in 1960s. And it was called Diana back then as well. And it was quite popular, and it was cheap, it was plastic, it was lightweight, and different companies could actually order their own, and they would all have the different name written here, and they would be called clones. So Lomography started reproducing this in 2007, and they added this plus here, then F plus. F stands for flash, and plus stands for added technical qualities like pinhole. So this is a newer version of the original Diana. And as I was showing you the film, I was showing you different numbers in the back. So what those numbers are in the back of the camera, you see this hole. And here it says 12. So the arrow showing 12 means that I'll get to see the numbers here, and I will be shooting 12 square images. And if I pull this up, then the arrow showing 16 with the empty area in the bottom, that will show me 16 numbers. So then I will be getting 16 photos. And how this works is, when I'm winding my film inside the camera, what I do is I wind until I see the next number. And so once I shoot 11, then I should wind until 12. Or once I shoot 15, I wind until 16, depending on what I'm seeing here. And if I switch from 16 to 12, I get 12 images, but nothing changes inside the camera. And that's totally fine. But if I switch from 12 to 16 without putting a mask inside here, I get 16 images that are overlapped by about half a centimeter without any breaks in between them, which means that it will look like a one long image, even though it might not be, and it will be almost impossible to scan it and totally impossible to cut it. And what I mean by overlaps and stuff is basically this. So here is a perfect little example of 12 image squares in a film with about half a centimeter between each image. So when I have the 12 showing in my camera, I get 12 big squares like this. And when I have 16 showing in my camera, if I don't have a mask inside, the area is again this. But I'm only winding the numbers based on the 16, so they get overlaps. And what I need to do is put a black mask inside my camera that is included in the package. And then I get 16 images that are smaller in area than this one. I always shoot 12 squares with my Diana, so I no longer have that mask. I lost it some time ago, but here is it. And as I said, you mostly wind the film in this format, and you wind until you see the next number here, and there's no rewinding, so there's no mechanism here. Anyway, this is one of the options if you want to go medium format. Another option is the Lubitel that is again reproduced by Lomography with the Plus, but it's original Russian camera historically. And the difference in this is when you open this part up, you actually get to see, when you look like this, you get to see what's in front of you. So like right now when I'm looking, I actually see my camera and the table and the living room further down. So you get to see your image and focus from here, and you have different settings here, but I'm not going to be getting into aperture and shutter speed and all that in this video. I'm just gonna focus on the film, so I'm not going to be talking much about that. But as I said, the difference with this is you look from here, focus here, and then take a photo. And this is a fun camera, and it is a little bit harder to use than the Diana because it's a little heavier, and then you get to know all the settings to make sure that you expose properly. So this is another option. If you're not a fan of square images but still would like to use a medium format film, an option might be the Bel Air from Lomography. And this has a bellow system, so you open it up to expose your images. And the cool thing about this is you get to do so much, sort of. Because what you do without any mask here, what you get is 6 images. So 6 rectangular images from one roll of medium format film. And if you put a mask, then you get 8 rectangular ones, but that are smaller, or you get, if you put the third mask in, you get 12 squares. So each time you put a mask inside, you basically cover up some part of this area to make the exposure area smaller and get more photos with your film. And with this one, like I said, you get to shoot 6, 12, or 9 images, and it changes from here. And I don't know if you've noticed, but there's no line that shows 6 here. So what you do is you actually follow the line that is for 12, but you skip 1. So you go from 2, 4, 6, and so on in order to wind properly. And that is another option. And all the options that I've shown until now have all had an emptiness in the back of the camera where you could see the number that you were shooting, so the exposure pose that you were in. And one option that doesn't have that is, as far as my cameras go, is the LCA 120. So the LCA 120 does not have an emptiness here. And how it works is when you put the film in, when you're winding, it actually stops automatically. So every time you shoot a photo and then wind your film, after a while it stops, unlike the other ones that I've explained. And that allows for no frame here. And also that would allow if you wanted to use 220 film, so 220 film, which is the same height without the backing paper. So how that film works is this film is taped to the paper here and the paper is gone. So there's no paper behind the film, but it's just film. And because of that, it has twice the exposure because it can fit here, and without the paper, you can fit twice as much film by rolling it up. But in order to use 220, you need to make sure that no light comes in through here. So one option to use that is this one. And with this, based on the film you're using, I usually get 11.5 photos because the initial length of paper changes from brand to brand. So if you close the camera too early or too late, you might get the first photo sort of cropped. But otherwise, after the first image that you just wind and it stops. So even if you push it further, it doesn't go. So you know that you're in the next frame. So as far as my cameras go, that is another option to use 120 film. So let's switch to 35mm film. And 35mm film comes in a canister like this, a metal canister. And the film is rolled up inside here. And when you put it in your camera, it opens up in order to be exposed. And there are two different types of cameras that use this film. One being when you put the film in, it winds the entire thing forward. And then every time you shoot a photo, it rewinds it back into the film canister, the metal here. And an example for that is the Canon Rebel 1000. And what happens with that camera is when you put the film in and then close the back up, you hear this sound. And the entire film is opened up inside the camera. And then every time you shoot a photo, it rewinds back in here. And the good thing about those kinds of cameras is if you accidentally open the back of your camera, the photos that you have already shot are safe inside here, so they don't get any light in. You only use the part you haven't used so far. So it's cool that the exposed images are safe inside here. The second type is, well, almost all my other cameras, which is when you put the film in, you click your shutter, expose the film area, and then forward your film. So every time you take a photo, you end up opening this inside the camera. And after your film is finished, you rewind it back inside the canister here, and then take it off and take it to your lab for development. And the most common thing with this film is these holes in the top and bottom. And these are actually Kodak's original perforations that were created back in 1930s, and all other brands have implemented since then. And I forgot my camera cabinet open. Anyways, these perforations have been in all of the 35mm films. And 35mm film is actually like 35mm from top to bottom here. But the exposure area in this is usually 24 in height and 36 in width. So if we take a look at a negative, if I can take this one. So each image is 36 millimeters in width and 24 millimeters in height with 2 millimeters in between. So this is your exposed film. And based on the film, most 35 millimeter films come in 36 exposures. Some come in 24 and some that are less, like 12 exposures. And most common is 36. But from a 36 roll, if your camera doesn't wind it forward first, and if you just put it in and start shooting directly, you get, let's see how many we get. So this is 1, so this is 36, 37, 38, 29 in this roll. Here I got another 39. And in this one, this has been cut even longer, so I got 40 images from my 36 exposure roll. So each film is rolled and cut, and there's always a few frames extra in order for you to get it inside your camera. First wind a couple and then start shooting, but I literally just shoot right from here, so I usually get more than 36 in a 36 exposure roll. And the most cameras that use this shoot rectangular images, like the ones I showed you in the negative. And there are, of course, some that shoot half frame, like the Diana Mini that can shoot up to 72 images. And there are some that are panoramic that shoot less. So let's take a look at different cameras as well. Okay, so I talked about the LCA 120, which is the remake of the LCA that is 35 millimeter format. So you see the difference in size quite clearly in here. And that is because the difference in size of this, since this is almost twice as long as 35 millimeter film, the camera also is almost twice as big. So let's begin with the LCA, which is one of my all-time trusted cameras. And how this works is with 35 millimeter film, when you open it up, you see the exposure area here. And you put your film here, roll the tip up to here to make sure that it catches. And then every time you take a photo, what you end up doing is, opening this up here, and when you press the shutter, you expose this area, and when you wind it forward, you roll it out into the open inside the camera, which I'm not gonna do right now because I don't want to burn my film. And once your film is done, you rewind it back inside the canister here, and then you take it off to take it to development. And this is a common format, so the exposure area, like I said, is 36 by 24, which is one of the most common ones. And another camera that is using the same format film with the same exposure area is the Lomography La Sardina. So you see here, this area is exactly the same size as this, so they both have the exact same exposure area, but because the lens is different, when you look through the viewfinder, what you see and what you get in the film changes. So this actually captures a wider area because the lens is a wide angle lens as opposed to this. But at the end, you get 36 photos from a 36 exposure roll. Another camera that does exactly the same is the Leica, and this is the M4P with the Lomography Russar lens on it. And when you open this up, this is actually a little different than the other two, where I opened the back up, and in the Sardina I took it all off. But here you take this bottom off, and when you hold this up, your exposure area is here. And you put your film in like this and pull it from here over to this side and make sure that you catch one of the little thingies there. I totally forgot what they're called. But so you don't actually see where you put the film in or where you wind it. And you close this back up, and then here we go. So when you lock it, it's ready to go. And this is another option that shoots 36 images from a 36 exposure roll. Another camera that I like using is the Lomography Sprocket Rocket. And the difference with this doesn't shoot 36 from a 36 exposure roll. It shoots, as you can see here, it has this wider area. So it shoots 18 images from a 36 exposure roll, which means every image is twice as long as what it would be with the other cameras that I just told you about. And how it works is this doesn't have the stop mechanism like the others. And in the others, when I press the shutter and wind forward, it stops automatically, so I know where to stop. Whereas this, it doesn't have a window here like the medium formats, but it has these little dots here, and one of them show you which exposure you're on, and the other has a white dot. So every time you press your shutter, you need to wind the film forward until you see the white dot once again. And what happens is, so as I showed you, this is a regular 35 millimeter negative shot with the LCA. So you see here you have 6 images that are separate from one another, and the film holes have not been exposed. And let's check out a Sprocket Rocket one. So I hope this is gonna be visible. So in this one, you actually have 3 images. So the first image is up to here from this side. The second image is between these two. And the third image is here, with this being the first one. And I hope it focuses. I'm not sure if it does, but you actually expose the holes in the bottom and top as well. So the entire area of the film is exposed. But instead of 36, you get only 18 from this film, or 19 if you're lucky and the film was a little long when it was being cut. And what this does is you get panoramic photos instead of regular images that are twice as long. And this is an option that does panoramic images. Another is the Old Russian Horizons, or the remakes of the Lomography, or Spinner 360, which actually lets you get like 7 or 8 images from a roll that are like 6 or 7 photos long. So these are all different options. So this is pretty much all I want to mention about different film formats, mainly the 120 and the 35 millimeter films. And if we want to do a little recap, both films need film development in order for you to see your images. And with the medium format, you mostly get square photos. And depending on your camera, you get somewhere between 6 to 16 shots. 6 and 8 being rectangular, and 12 and 16 being square images. And the thing about this is you get less photos from a roll of film. And it is more prone to light leaks because of this structure here that can get loose if you don't tie it up really tightly. And the film development costs the same, but when you divide it by like per image cost, this ends up being a little more expensive. And the scanning in this one is more expensive because most places usually do per frame price for scanning. So if you have 12 out of 12 images, you may end up paying more money for film development and scanning with this one, as opposed to this, which has 36 exposures. So when you buy a roll of film, you get more photos from your roll. And mostly the film development and scanning have fixed prices. So it doesn't matter if you only get like 3 usable images or 40 in my case in some times. You pay something specific. So this might end up costing less per image when you calculate the entire thing, considering how expensive the film is, plus development, plus scanning, plus printing if you also want to get prints. And like I said, this mostly does square images and this mostly does rectangular images. So depending on which image format you like more, one film might be better for you. And if you have any other questions or if you want to ask something about either these or other films, just drop me a line in the comments and I'll get back to you. And otherwise, I'll see you next time and I hope you enjoyed this video. Bye.